Hello and welcome to the Larger Than Necessary First Player Token podcast. This is episode 75. My name is Chris.
This is Euan.
I'm David.
This is Euan.
This
is England.
Just felt like too sad. I was just trying to be formal. I like to be formal now and again.
I don't think that was formal.
It was like news formal.
That was just weird.
News presenter formal.
But the thing is, if you're saying this is, then you're introducing somebody else.
Just a fairly incompetent news reporter.
This is Euan, me.
This be Euan.
How you doing, boys?
Pretty good. Here for another late night podcast, which is why Pawel's not joining us.
Pawel's not here, so we've decided to record at a sensible time.
Yeah. After dark.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, that could get us. I could get us sued.
Right, well, we're going to have a board games episode this week. We did say last week it was probably going to be a video games episode, and we're hyping up the Retro Games Book Club. But this just means that you've got another week to get your chat in about Megalomania.
I've still got a bit of work to do on Megalomania.
You think so?
Yeah. There's still time for me.
I was watching you playing it the other day there, and
steep learning curve.
Yeah, steep learning curve. I was trying to show you, like, you don't do that, do this.
Eventually, I got it right. Yeah,
but well, you've got another week to get your chatting about that. But this week, we reckon we've played enough board games over the past few weeks to actually justify a board games episode. So we've got a few things to talk about. We're going to start off with Dave. Actually, you've been playing something that we played. Me and you, and we played this years ago now.
Oh, a long time
3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
But Dave, you've picked up a copy of this.
The second edition of Mansions of Madness.
Yes.
The original Mansions of Madness, which is, I assume, the one that you guys played, is what do you call it? One versus many. It's not really, is it? I mean, you can come about it. You can look at it different ways. You can look at it as a one versus many sort of adventure-y. It's not a dungeon, but you're in a mansion, and it's a sort of Cthulhu type adventure.
right.
And there's scenarios just like an Imperial Assault and Descent, and there's like different things that can happen. So what one player plays is more like a games master, I think. I don't know. Was that how you saw it, or did you see it more adversarial?
I remember that was kind of weird because I almost felt like the person that was running the show was, I don't know, almost a non-entity. It was really strange.
Well, I think the reason they made... Well, I'm assuming the reason they made a second edition is a lot of people seemed like they weren't very happy with that sort of state of affairs. There was questions about balance, I believe. Apparently, if it was like way too easy for the games master to win the game or to make the other team lose, the people who are working cooperatively to solve the mystery. And also, I think perhaps it wasn't that much fun being the GM, but I don't know. I assume neither of you guys played the games master or whatever they call it.
I don't really remember an awful lot about the game.
Yeah, I mean, because we only played one scenario. I remember having a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's turn-based co-op, action points. Everyone gets 2 actions, and you can move, you can attack, you can investigate various points of interest on this cardboard tile map that gets laid out as you explore. And I assume the person who's running the show has a little book to look at, and whenever you say, I'm going to look and see what's in this desk and look through these papers, and then they'll tell you what there is, and it usually involves rolling dice. What they did for the second edition is they've replaced the Games Master with an app. That's not only is it the biggest change, I believe there's probably been some other gameplay changes alongside that in order to make it work with the app. But that's the main difference between the two. And that's the version I've got, and I've been playing a couple of games with it. I've played 2 scenarios now. Well, I've played more than 2 games, but I've played the first 2 scenarios. I played the first scenario like 3 times, and I wasn't hugely impressed by it, I have to say. I know I was talking to you guys about it, and I was a bit disappointed with it. It was a bit meh. And that had nothing to do with the app. It was the game itself. It just seemed really old-fashioned, and there was a ton of dice rolling, just way too much for me. But it's strange because I played the second scenario, and my opinion now of it is completely different, because I enjoyed the second scenario immensely. So I don't really know what to make of that. It's really down to the... It's obviously the enjoyment of that game for me is down to the scenario design, because the first one was a complete... The introductory one was just a complete miss. I wouldn't have wanted to play it again if that was the only one I'd ever played. And the second one was full of interest. I mean, I'm not going to spoil specifically what happens in it, but it was just way more like interesting as a story. There was more going on. The first one, there were a couple of points of interest, but it was mostly involved just rolling a freaking ton of dice.
Was it maybe set up to just be a kind of introduction to the game? Or?
It is, I think, but it's interesting because I think they need to make a better... I think they've... Well, the game's selling massively well as far as I can tell, so, I mean, maybe it's not an issue, but to me, if I was looking at it, I'd have said, you need to go back and look at that first scenario, because you're going to put people off the game if this is their first experience of it, and I would just skip straight to the second one.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I mean, that's why I played it 3 times, because we beat it on the second attempt, I think. But I played it myself, and then I played with my girlfriend, and then I played again on my own, just to see if it was me. And I was like, this game must be more fun, but it just wasn't really.
So what was so different about the second scenario that changed your opinion?
It's hard to say without spoiling what's going on, but it had a better story. The first one, you're just investigating strange goings on at the mansion. The second one, it opens. You've been called to, I think is it Innsmouth? I'm not sure. One of the Cthulhu-esque places.
Innsmouth's one.
Yeah, and you've been performing some sort of investigation, and you were hoping to leave, but you weren't able to get the trains and buses were all cancelled, so you have to go and spend the night hole up in a hotel.
That sounds very much like Innsmouth, certainly from the going around the story.
Yeah, because one of the interesting things about Mansions of Madness 2nd edition is they've made it somewhat backwards compatible with the 1st edition in terms of people can reuse the expansions in the original box. They can reuse some of the content. And I can see why they've done that, because it's a relatively short period between the two. And there was a lot of content for the first one, and that would be a significant financial investment in its Fantasy Flight. So, you're looking at... Well, I mean, the box set now is like £75, and then each expansion is like 30 quid or whatever. So if you buy like 4 of those, it's a lot of money. So I can see why they've wanted to do that. But yeah, there are pros and cons to that. This is the other thing. I really wish they hadn't done this. Sort of getting slightly sidetracked from what I was saying before. But because what I was going to say is the second one is all about Dagon. Because they've had to include different stuff in the second one. They can't just have the same monsters and things. So
do you know what the first one was kind of themed around? I can't remember. I mean, was it more generic?
Cultists? There's still cultists in the second one, but there's a lot of sea stuff in the second one. So there's I can't even remember any of the names of the sea monsters. Shall I just make some up?
You can go for it. Yeah.
Call one of them Pawel.
Sea Pawel.
Sea Pawel. Okay.
See Pawel run.
Ocean Pole.
Yeah, so
I mean, a band called Ocean Pole.
They're a prog band.
Oh, there's a lot of good Polish prog bands.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
That's Pawel.
That's Pawel, no.
Oh, yeah, Pawel's a soundster. He'll know what's going on.
Point of order right now, I know this is in the middle of a podcast and this is an administrative thing, but can we start doing a feature called Soundsters
Oh, if you like.
Right, I'll decide what it is.
I mean, I don't even know what you've got in mind, and I'm already well up.
I just think it needs to be called Soundsters.
Anyway, let's carry on with the podcast.
So you've got Dagon anyway, and
yeah. I was going to say that's the contents of the box set, the base set for Mansions of Madness Second Edition is Dagon themed, so there's a lot of sea stuff in there, and I assume that's just so it doesn't overlap with the first one, you could say. But yeah, that backwards compatibility comes with a cost. Do you remember the bases on the little models? They're the whenever if I bring it over at some point and we'll get a game of it maybe.
Yeah.
You'll see them. They are the worst thing ever. They're these massive black plastic bases that cover up like a huge amount of the playing surface. And that's these sort of cardboard tiles that are the layout of the wherever you are, the buildings and the streets and what have you. And then they're quite nice. They're nicely painted, and you don't have that much to look at. And especially as you're looking at the app a lot of the time as well. So, it seems crazy to like cover up so much of the playing surface, so much of with these massive black bases. But they've done this because they have to retain compatibility with the old expansions in the old box set. And I wish they hadn't. I wish they'd just ditched it and made a new game.
Just done, yeah.
Because even though I have enjoyed playing the sort of second scenario, it is still a little bit. I mean, it's good, but it's a wee bit old-fashioned to me.
Yeah, it seems odd to kind of hold over things from the first game if they were trying to sort of redesign it. And like you say, if it's been in such a short space of time, it feels like they really did want to overhaul the game. So
I feel like they could have. I mean, they could have kept the premise of it, which is that you're solving a kind of mystery, and that's a big part of it. And my girlfriend really enjoyed that side of it. The fact that we weren't just like killing monsters or something like that. We were like solving a mystery, and it comes through, and the app helps a little bit with that. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't do it with a real person, but the app does a reasonable job of standing in for a real person, and it saves like setup time as well a little bit, and it saves someone flicking through a book and going, "Oh, hang on a sec, let me find the bit. All right, this is what happens." The app just tells you everything to do.
I don't think the whole concept of a Games Master really translates well to board games. I mean, there's not many that I can think of or any really that I can think of that use it. Apart from that,
I'm sure that there are a few, and I'm sure that we've played some.
Probably. But I mean, even things like we might have talked about this before, but the original Descent, the first edition. Oh, in fact, the expanded campaign version, the Game Master, and that just became an utterly thankless task.
I had to cancel a campaign of that which I was the evil overlord basically, because I was just turning up and going through the motions, and I wasn't getting any fun out of it whatsoever. It was just like, I mean, there was bits and bobs here and there where you're like, oh yeah, I can upgrade this group of monsters or something like that, but that was basically the extent of it. It was the other players that were getting all the fun because they were running around slaying monsters and they absolutely loved doing stuff like that.
Getting ridiculously strong as well.
Yeah, but I was dedicating like just about every Sunday afternoon to doing this, and it was like, there are other games to play. I mean, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. Like, I felt kind of bad for doing it, but at the same time, it was like, well, like how long? The other problem with that Descent campaign was it just went on and on and on and on and on, and just never ended. And yeah, I just had to draw the line somewhere.
Oh, that's fair enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the app is a good solution for it. It's not perfect because you're looking at a freaking iPad a lot of the time,
right?
Even if it is, playing music and giving you a wee bit of atmosphere, and a lot of it involves reading. And I'm not, I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest.
What, reading?
In games, yeah. It makes the idea is you've got all these points of interest that you can investigate, and it's a way of giving them flavour so that they're not all obviously just a dice roll. Is that you're not just rolling a dice to investigate a point of interest. You're looking through a lock. You're trying to break into a locked cupboard, and then maybe some noxious gas will come out of it, and you'll have to do like some sort of sanity test and all this sort of thing. It gives a bit of story type flavour to it. But it does mean that you spend a lot of the time, like you have to, each time you can't just fly through this game. You have to look at what the app says each time you do anything. It's not, you can't speed through it and go, right, okay, this is a such and such test, this is a sanity test, this is a will test, this is a strength test. The sort of 5 sort of standard attributes that they have in these games. Even like there's a standard thing where if there's a monster nearby you at the end of the mythos phase, you have to take a horror check for the most horrifying monster that's in your sort of vicinity, and everybody has to do that who's within range of a monster. It's a standard thing, but you still have to do it through the app because there's some variability that they build into it. It's not just a case of doing a will test. It will tell you what type of test to do,
right?
And it will give you a bit of descriptive text to say this is what you see, and so sometimes you might do a dexterity or a strength test. So you're completely beholden to it.
So do you see that as a downside? The fact that there's a lot of text to read? Because I mean, it feels like they've kind of made these sort of Cthulhu style, these Lovecraft games that Fantasy Flight do. They do put a lot of flavour text in these things, and I really enjoy that side of it. I really enjoy reading all these things. But do you think that that's a downside in this game?
It's not. I don't know if it's. You can't really describe it as a downside because I know there are people that aren't bothered by it. So it's just something to be aware of. I mean, hopefully we'll get to play it, and you guys can see what you think of the actual app side of it, because the game itself is more or less the same,
right,
as far as I can tell. So it will be interesting to see what you make of passing an iPad around. I'm kind of on the fence about it.
It sounds like it could be interesting, getting you more immersed in the game and things not just being just a kind of dry, just dice roll, right, that's that thing done. Actually sort of getting involved in it a bit more. Yeah,
I mean, it's a way to do it, that's for sure. I prefer games like, what's it called? Is it Rebellion? Is that the one that we played, the 2-player game, Star Wars?
The Star Wars one, yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, that doesn't have any flavour text in it that you have to read. I mean, I'm sure there's some optional text on cards that you can sit and look at, but it doesn't rely on
and I think
textual descriptions, and yet
I think
it tells
in that
us
game,
amazing story, and I prefer that style.
In that game, that's a positive, not having lots of flavour text or anything, because you do make everybody knows the Star Wars story, and you're making your own version of that. And it can have some interesting, like, funny, hilarious things, like, turning Obi-Wan Kenobi to the dark side and stuff like that. Just, it's great.
Yeah. So, I always feel that large amounts of text, I don't know, it's almost like a wee bit of a cop-out, I think. But, I mean, we've got another text-heavy game coming up that we're going to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
So, true.
But I feel broadly the same way.
Yeah, well, we should probably move on, actually. We've talked about Mansions of Madness a bit longer than we were originally intended. So, yeah, that's Mansions of Madness. That's a Fantasy Flight game, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, let's move on. So, we're going to talk about a game that I bought, must have been more than a year ago.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been sitting on the shelf because it's a legacy game. It's Seafall, but I got Gloomhaven in the meantime. Like, so I think I got.
Yeah, you got Seafall first.
I got Seafall first, I'm pretty sure, and then Gloomhaven turned up, so that became the legacy game we've been playing. Unfortunately, we've not been able to play Gloomhaven much since one of the guys we play with had a kid. We didn't want to go on without him, so we've just kind of we've given him a bit of space to
just put it on hold for a bit.
To whatever, nurture his child.
Give him some nurturing.
I didn't know what the terminology was there.
That's fair enough.
But so yeah, we decided the other day there when we were looking for a game to play that we hadn't played yet, we would start Seafall with the three of us and our friend Ian. Now, I've heard since I got Seafall, I picked it up. It's a Rob Daviau game. It's a legacy game. I knew that there had to be a commitment to it, and I've heard that, like, of all the sort of legacy games that are out there, I think this is the one that kind of polarises opinions the most. I don't think it was quite as popular as things like Risk Legacy and Pandemic Legacy, and I think Pandemic Legacy is the big name there. So I've heard different opinions about Seafall. One, that the campaign just goes on far too long, but we've only like scratched the surface with it. We played the prologue, and basically that was it. But we've got a feel for what the game is. Now, in Seafall, you're basically running a province, but it's a seafaring province, and each player's got their own, and you can play it with up to 5 people. We're playing 4. And you basically start a game with 2 little ships, and there's a bunch of islands on the board and a mysterious gate out in sea, sort of far out in the sea. And you will sail your ships around, doing various things like, you can go to the islands and you can explore the islands that are there. When you do that, you'll get there's a captain's book which has got various sort of numbered passages in it. So when you go to an island and you explore a certain point, you can pick. Basically, the islands are covered in symbols, and there's a map inside the captain's book, and you pick one of the symbols that matches the one on the island. Turn to that passage, read it out, and then something will happen, and it might involve you like annoying the natives or something like that. It's like a choose your own adventure. You're generally given a choice, and you have to turn to a different passage. But then you'll be covering the island. Once you explore these spots, you'll cover them up with like various sort of resource producing places and stuff like that. But you might also, like, if you upset the natives, you might have to put your own little enmity markers in to say that you've upset people here. But what you can do is you can go, once things are explored, you can pick stuff up with your boats, like resources like wood and silk and iron and stuff like that. And you can take them to other places and sell them. Generally, you'll take them back to your province. And you can also just raid these places, which will give enmity to the island. You can move around, you can build things in your province, you can upgrade your ships as you're playing, that kind of thing. And basically the reason you're doing this is to try and get glory. And when you get to a certain amount of glory, you win that game of Seafall, and you will move on to the next game. But generally stuff will happen. So there are like milestones in the game, so there's these little cards that you put out. Now in the prologue, they're very basic. And it's basically just that every time somebody gets to a multiple of 3 glory, they can name one of the islands. Because it's a legacy game. So you're writing on the board, you're writing on the cards, you're doing all this stuff that is going to permanently change the game. Now, the prologue ends once all 4 of the islands are named. And like I say, every time somebody gets a multiple of 3 glory, you name an island. And it got an interesting point, because when the first milestone we met, when the first person got to name an island, it was Euan, actually, and it tells you to tear up the milestone card. Now Euan was very reluctant to do this. He was like, "This feels wrong. I don't want to do this." But I was egging him on because it's my game. I paid the money for it. I can understand why people might feel uncomfortable with tearing it up.
You're going to do what the rulebook says.
Yeah, so you do what the rulebook says. So yeah, we tore up these cards. I've basically covered what the basics of Seafall there.
Basically, yeah. I can see why they needed a prologue in this game.
Yeah, because it's hard to get your head round.
Yeah. I don't think a game has really flummoxed me quite as much as that in a long time.
It's the mechanics of it, because when you take your turn, it's not just a case of you move your ships and you just do an action. You have to take like guild actions, which mean that you're given a choice of actions that you can do. And generally, they're, if you take the Merchant's Guild action, then you can buy and sell stuff as well as move your ships. You can always move your ships. Yeah. And then there's like the Soldiers Guild or something like that. There's the Explorers Guild, and they give you different actions depending on their theming basically. And that was the bit that was more difficult to get your head round. Was just like, all right, okay. But then when you do these various things, you have to roll certain numbers of dice. I'll be honest, I think this rulebook is terribly written.
You think?
I think so. I don't know if it's because it's a legacy game and there's lots of spaces in the rulebook for adding rules to. So that as you unlock certain things in the game, as you get to certain milestones, the game will change. You have to put stickers in the rulebook that change the rules themselves. So I don't know if the rulebook's written in a very specific way to try and cover that.
But
I didn't really like the layout of it.
That was one thing that kind of struck me about the whole, because I think we all brought this up at some point. The whole turn order thing in it, how your turn works. You've got these 5 actions that you take that are kind of like the standard. You go through these, and the guild actions. You choose your guild and you take 2 actions from the guild. That just seems needlessly convoluted. Really does. But then I start to think, well, if this game's going to modify as you go on, there must be a reason for it. If we get to this end of the game and there's no reason for that, no obvious, then it's a shit game. I'm going to say that now. So that's going to be my prediction.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that annoyed me so much.
It just seemed pointless. It's not.
I think the whole purpose of it, and I think that they try to do some thematic thing with it. I think they're like, you have to hire a guild every turn, but I think the reason for it was just basically to stop people from, like, I'm going to go to this island, raid it, but also explore it at the same time. So you're only doing one specific thing every turn.
Yeah.
Now, it does mean that you have to plan your actions, because you've got 2 ships, and there was a couple of turns in the prologue, and it's good that I made these mistakes in the prologue, but where I could have been way more efficient with, like, buying and selling stuff. Like, instead I'd, like, moved a ship the previous turn that I didn't need to move back to, like, my home province, and then it just sat there for like 2 turns because I hadn't taken the Merchants Guild yet, because I wanted to buy something with the other ship but also sell something with the ship that was sitting in the province, and the other ship wasn't ready to buy anything. It was nowhere near anything. So I kind of get that, like, that it's more to do with you do one specific thing every turn. But yeah, I think, like I said, they've just tried to do something thematic with it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind the guild stuff quite so much. I can sort of see what both of you are getting at. It did take us a little bit to get the whole thing down. Not just the guild thing, but like how each of the actions actually worked, like explore versus raid versus just buying something, because they're both, or all 3 of them are sort of similar in terms of outcome, but represent a different thing and can be done under different
Well, there were certain
circumstances.
things with, like, obviously you couldn't raid somewhere that hadn't been explored.
Exactly.
You couldn't, if you explored somewhere or tried to trade with somewhere that, because you'd get a cube, like a little resource would go on a space that was producing something, but once it was bought up, that was it, gone. And I think the only way of getting resources from that was to raid it, basically force resources out of it. So
that was sort of that seemed very unfamiliar to us, because when we started the game there were two resource cubes on the board, and that's essentially all we were getting for that entire.
I think it was 4
entire
actually.
game. Was there 4?
There was 4. There was one on each island.
So very, very few, and like I think within the first turn or 2 they'd all been taken, and we're like, well, is that it? Do we get any more resources? But I think what you were supposed to do in the first mission really was just go and explore all the islands and populate each of the unexplored spaces with resources or whatever other sorts of things you could maybe find as a result of your explore action, which we eventually sussed out.
Yeah.
But that's not how you normally would play one of these games. Normally there's a balance of everything. However, when we go on to the next game, there's going to be a whole bunch of resources
there's going to be like
sitting on there to
10, 11, 12 resources sitting on the board that we can go and pick up and sell again.
Yeah.
And that's when we get into the first proper game, so there's going to be a lot of choice there.
Yeah.
You went crazy with the raiding because, I don't know, for some reason you hated these islands.
I just decided I wanted to mess up these. Yeah, the first couple of ones, I think it just worked out that way, that I was like, oh, well, I think I can do yours. I think I didn't have a choice the first time, and then the second time I was like, well, this is quite convenient. I might just raid.
Yeah, just raid everything.
There was the thing that we meant to mention about the advisors.
Yeah.
That made a big difference in kind of, because when I was looking at the advisors, I go, well, what's gonna really like benefit taking a particular guild? If I get a bonus with this, right, why not just go for that? And I think the raiding was something that came up. It was just like, well, I can get like a massive bonus, and I'm not gonna take any damage.
There was one point where, because just to be clear, you can hire an advisor every turn, and they're just little cards basically with people on them that will give you certain bonuses, and as the game goes on, these people will get upgraded as well themselves. Like the players at the end of each game can start doing stuff like that.
We've already named a bunch of them as well.
Yeah, and if you're the first person to take an unnamed advisor, you can name them. So there's a whole bunch of comedy names going on in our game of Seafall. We're not taking it too seriously, but
yeah.
Going by our ship names.
Our ship names.
Pawel would be appalled.
Oh yeah, he would absolutely hate what we've called all our stuff.
Do you think anyone gives their ships serious names?
Yeah, definitely.
I wouldn't even know what's a serious
historic
ship name?
names, or just like very dramatic names like Illustrious or Endeavour.
Yeah. Persevere.
Classic. Aye.
Desperation.
And not Chuckle Brother themed names then, Dave.
What?
I thought mine, the Lusty Cardinal, kind of works.
The Lusty Cardinal, yeah.
That's
quite
good.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose mine were a bit anachronistic, weren't they?
I'm glad that you and Ian managed to avoid calling one of your ships Sea Bastard, though.
It was tempting.
It was. The idea was bandied about for a while, but...
Are we wanting to mention, by the way, just while we're on, because I know we brought up this gripe before, as I continue, and you're mentioning the advisors there.
Yes. Yes, this is one of my least favourite things in Kickstarter games, and I have mentioned this before. And I'm gonna, you're right, Euan. You're right to point this out. You're right to pull people up for this. All right, if you're making a fucking game on Kickstarter, stop putting Kickstarter backers' faces on your cards. It looks stupid.
It's like, it's so obvious. I mean, the minute we took the cards off,
look at this fat, sweaty man.
The thing is, and I think with this one as well, I don't know, maybe some people are more suited to that look, but certain of the cards I was like, oh no, I think that's not based, I think that is, just either a stock image or something that's been illustrated rather than just taken from a photograph of some games designer or other, somebody that's bunged them £100. It's quite jarring.
Aye,
they are terrible.
They're terrible. The ones in viticulture are particularly bad.
Yeah, but these ones are. I mean, I saw a picture of all of them on Board Game Geek, as people like to take pictures of the components and put them up before the games come out. And so someone had taken a picture of all of the advisor cards, and it was just a desperate looking display. It's like, I would not buy that game.
Based on that, you wouldn't buy it.
Yeah. They kept that one quiet.
But I mean, because they're such a big part of the game as well. I believe you get to keep one of your advisors after we start playing it properly. I think you get to hang on to one, maybe more in the future. Who knows? And you want them to look characterful and exciting. I mean, why couldn't they have just done a sort of impression of these people's faces rather than one that looks like
to make it more just
I think being an artist is a start, like a caricature artist.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't. Some of them looked like they'd just been like traced on a photograph.
Yeah. Aye.
I mean, some were cool. It was strange as well. There's a couple of them that were like very dramatic looking.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them just looked like, I don't know.
Like somebody walking down a high street.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was the one in particular, it was like the Brute. I was like, this guy doesn't work in the office. He's a dangerous fellow. Maybe they just went outside and found someone that stumbled out of a pub. I'm like, right, quick, paint him.
Yeah, and there was one other who looked fairly fearsome. And they don't all have to look fearsome, but they looked the part. And I'm like, well, can't they all look like that? And they can still be based on people who've paid money. I'm sure they would prefer that as well. If I sent my picture, and I don't just want them, I just want the photograph I've sent them turned into a pencil-y looking drawing.
With your Nirvana t-shirt.
Yeah. I mean, I want to look freaking awesome so that people think my card is amazing. It's not like, I've got the secretary.
See,
the sea secretary.
There is a game I've played where they basically did what you're describing. They basically took real people but made them fit to the game rather than just tracing their faces and their hairstyle. I'm tempted to say it was Forge War, but I can't remember. I I really honestly can't
don't
remember.
recall there
But I
being
have
anything
seen
like
one
that,
game where they
unfortunately.
did kind of make it work.
But then if it wasn't so noticeable, then maybe we might not
Aye.
have remembered.
I still prefer they didn't do that, but there you go.
You got to give something to the Kickstarter folk, ain't you?
Well, that's it.
Well, we've spent most of the time talking about Seafall, having a go at the people that got their faces on the card.
Well, Seafall itself, so far, I'm quite happy with it.
I see
quite
the
like
potential.
I can see the potential. I quite like the way it played.
It's all potential, though. I mean, if that was just... I mean, that's not just the game, but if that was just the game, then it's very kind of so-so, obviously. But it is just the prologue, and we were just populating it. But I'm hoping for more than just 15 games of Euro cube shipping, selling, buying. I'm going to raid this turn. I might just tax my people and I need 3 coins. There better be more to it than that, I think.
There is a worry it could go that way, but I think...
I'm sure there will be, but it's like there will be more. I mean, there's obviously more. There's little boxes that we're going to open and envelopes and cards to be ripped in half and set on fire. And
even on what we've already seen, though, there do seem to, there seem to be like a lot of, it's not just the trading. There's, the making your obviously that's just
I want exciting things to happen. It's not like a game that I'd play so that I could try and win. It's like I'd like to play this game so that I can kind of role play it a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see, though.
Oh, so you're going to be the guy that's starting to be attacking our provinces, eh?
Well,
be watching out for this one.
Well, going to me, to you.
To me. Barry's taking damage below decks.
No slacking.
Heave to, Paul.
I think if anybody's going to ruin this game, it'll be us.
Oh.
It's not going to be the rules. We'll ruin it. Anyway, yeah, that was Seafall. We'll continue talking about that in future board gaming episodes once we've actually got some more games under our belt. But I mean, like I say, in the meantime, I fairly enjoyed the prologue. We'll see how we get on with the other games. I think the other games are going to be longer, and there's going to be more stuff. I think the games, like we say, they're going to open up a bit more, and there's going to be more stuff that we can do.
That's good flavour text.
It has good flavour text, yes. Been quite enjoying annoying all the natives on the islands. So yeah, Seafall, it's Rob Davio, it's Plaid Hat Games. Right, let's move on. Euan, you've actually played a full game, and we weren't involved in it.
Yes.
I don't know if this is a first, but...
I think it maybe. There's definitely been games that I've not been involved in that you've played, so... But yeah, I was...
You went off with these new friends.
I know, yeah. A place was free for a game of Terraforming Mars. Shout out to Juliana from who I know is a listener. Certainly only to the board game episodes, from what I've been told.
That's not surprising.
But that's I'm told that's how it works on the in the highfalutin world of gaming podcasts. But yeah, I played Citadels. And it's my first time playing it. I've been aware of this game for. I think it's one I've sort of looked at potentially getting. It is a Euro game. It's. I see. I was originally a bit sceptical. I mean, it obviously has all the pedigree of a Euro game, but there's certain elements to me that are really quite sort of contradictory from what I would expect from a Euro game. The basic way it works, this is the thing. I'm going to talk a bit about the sort of how you play it with different numbers of players. We played it with 5. That was my experience of it. I've only looked into a little bit about how it works with other players, but it does seem to change quite drastically.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to stick to mainly about how my experience of the game, but there are other variants, and there's also a lot of different characters that you can take. In terms of sort of gameplay, it's quite simple. It's all card based, and you've got little sort of coin counters. You have a set of character cards that are in the game and a set of building cards, and you will start off with, I can't remember, a certain amount of money and 5 building cards. The way the round works is you'll have somebody starting off with the crown. I can't remember there's always like some weird deciding factor in these games, and I can't remember what it is for Citadels. I'm sure it was something quite amusing. But whoever has the crown is the king, and they are going to start off with the deck of characters. And so in a 5-player game, you've got the full 8 characters. I think you can add a 9th, and there's interchangeable ones in expansions and things like that. But they'll be numbered 1 to 8, and that'll sort of denote the priority of when those characters are played. So the king starts off, they take these characters, they will draw 2, and one's placed face up on the table, one's placed face down. And those characters are out for that round, so they can't be selected. The advantage of going first in this, with being the king, having the crown, you're going to know what that face down one is. So you're the king, you choose what your character is, and then you pass it on. It goes round clockwise, everyone chooses a character, and then the king then calls the characters forth. And it's all very, the way the rounds play out, it's all very kind of, there's a lot of theatrics to this. It has to be the king that calls them in order, and I've got them noted down here in order, the characters. So you've got number 1, the assassin, goes first. And the assassin can then, at that point, when they're called, nominate any of the other sort of character cards to be assassinated, and they're out of the game. The thief nominates any character, and when it gets round to them, if you have that character, you have to give them all your money. The magician can swap a hand of cards with another player, and it doesn't matter, they don't have to be the same number, so you could have no cards and just take an entire hand of cards from somebody. Or you can swap cards you have with the deck. I've got the order here right. Number 4 is the king, so you take the king, you take the crown, and you're first player to take your character in the next one. The bishop is number 5. The bishop, you're safe from the warlord, who I'll get on to. The 6th one's the merchant, and you basically take an extra coin. The 7th one is the architect, which is very powerful, because normally you can only build 1 building on your turn. The architect can build up to 3. And number 8 is the warlord, who goes last. And the warlord can destroy a building that's already been played. It's in front of you. The object of the game is to get 8 buildings played in front of you. So in that way, I remember thinking of it as slightly like Race for the Galaxy, where you're just trying to get these things, or a lot of these kind of games like San Juan, the card version of Puerto Rico, where you're just trying to get...
Right.
And the game ends on the round where somebody gets out their 8th building, even if they are like the last player in that round. So yeah, these you've got all these roles, and once you've sort of chosen your role, you move on to the action phase, and that's the same for everyone basically. You either take 2 coins, or you draw 2 building cards and choose one of them. Obviously, your roles will affect what you do. So if you're an assassin, you might have assassinated somebody, a thief, and so on. There's also things with the certain characters having colours on the sort of number, and it corresponds to, in the game you've got 5 different colours of buildings. Red, blue, yellow and green being the main ones, and then purple ones, which don't have a corresponding character number, but they usually have some weird power that will give you money or something at the end of the game. They're usually for scoring points at the end of the game. But when you take a character, so for example, the king is yellow, the king in yellow.
More Cthulhu.
Yep. So if you, for any yellow coloured buildings that you've already got out in front of you, you'll get an extra coin.
Right.
And that'll sort of, so like the merchant's green, the bishop's blue, and the warlord's red. I'm breaking them down to colours, but they are kind of thematic. Like for example, the blue buildings for the bishop, they're all
religious.
They're all religious buildings. That kind of thing. So there's advantages in taking them, and that's it. You draw your card, and then you can build a building. Unless you're the architect, you can build up to 3. And the building costs printed on the card. It's very simple. It'll show you a number of gold coin symbols on the card, and you pay that number. That's one thing I should have mentioned with the Warlord. You have to pay to destroy the building, so you have to pay the cost of it. So it's not just destroy a building. And that's basically it. You go around until somebody's played their 8th building, and then you count up whoever has the most money wins. Scores based on things like the purple buildings, as I mentioned. If you have a set of all 5 colours, then you'll get an extra gold or something like that. And it's also the total value of your building. So if you're playing high value buildings, essentially it's going to get you lots of points. And that's the basis of it. But what really gets me about this game is the characters. This is why I'm not sure it's a Euro game. Because, like I say about the assassin, there's a potential for somebody to not play a single round in this game. If it just happened, just by the odds, that if the assassin comes out on every single round and the assassin chooses the particular role, it's unlikely, but it's possible. And I don't think I can think of a Euro game that has something that cruel be a possibility in the game.
Right, so I've heard a lot of things about Citadels. I've never actually looked into the game itself.
Yeah.
All right. It's one of these, like a game that's just been bandied around for quite a while.
Aye.
And I've heard that it's very, it's a Marmite game. Like, people either love it or they hate it. And judging by that description, I can understand why. That's the case.
It can cause arguments.
It's for very particular people. I mean, you basically played this with a bunch of strangers.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a great situation to play this by the sounds of it.
It was. I mean, but this was the thing. I noticed from the get go that they were they all knew each other, so they were kind of going for it. And I was like, well, aye, fine. If I go for the assassin, and I very quickly took on stuff like that. Right, I'm going to start assassinating people, and you're very quickly get to see how the game works, and this is a thing I was reading a bit about the rules in Board Game. I was looking at some people's sort of stories of playing it, and there do seem to be common elements about how people play the game. They will look at, all right, what's particularly things like the Architect, really powerful card. If somebody's got 5 cards and you're looking at them going, potentially, if they're building up money, they're going to be going for the Architect card, and if you get a chance to assassinate or take money from them, you're going to do that. I found in that definitely followed in that game, and it was certainly one of the players was like kind of making this quite clear as part of the game's explanation to me. Is like, yeah, you want to be killing the merchant, you want to be killing the architect, and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, all right, and that was pretty much clear. I took the merchant, I think, on the first or second turn, and it was assassinated. I don't think for even any good reason. I was just like, all right, well, that's happened.
The merchant will do.
But I found through the game, the sort of people getting knocked out of rounds from assassination, it roughly evened out.
Right.
So it wasn't, it didn't feel entirely cruel. But the way that you play it is you keep quiet until it's round to your roll. So if the assassin's going to be the first one out, they'll say, right, I want to assassinate the merchant. It takes a while for you to get round to the merchant, and the merchant might not be in play. Nobody knows until it gets right. And if somebody call the merchant, you go, right, I'm dead. But you don't say it when the assassin says, I'm going to assassinate the merchant. Right, so there's this element of tension always going on in the game, and I've seen that brought up in people's sort of descriptions of it, and I think that is a big draw for people. This kind of, there's like a weird, and the folk I was playing with kind of bought into that a bit. They, because I think on the first game, or when I was first assassinated, I kind of very obviously made to say if it was just forgetting that was a thing, and they went, no, and I kind of saw as the game went, oh yeah, this makes sense to kind of do it that way, to have this kind of weird tension in the character and like in the turn order. It's an interesting game. I think I quite enjoyed it. I think we could probably, it could cause arguments, I'm sure, but
yeah. I think if this is what I mean by what I said earlier, you'd have to play it with people that you knew, and people that you knew were not going to get huffy. Because it sounds harsh.
Oh, totally.
It's like brutal.
Harsher than any, and this is why I'm just like contentious for a Euro game, because no Euro game I've ever played has had such harshness in it, and such kind of like raw game theory kind of mechanics that it's just like, right, you're just out to screw each other over. And the game is, I think it's called Machiavelli in the Dutch version. It's all like it is. It's all these kind of. It is really meant to be that way. And from what I've seen of the sort of expansion characters, they sort of add to that even more. There's things like the tax collector taking money from everyone. It is meant to be slightly dark, and you're meant to be these kind of nasty characters, like these sort of various nobles and things.
How long does it take to play? Typically,
it's not a particularly long one. We maybe took about an hour to play it, but I felt that we maybe dragged it out a bit, and partly because I was new to it as well. I think a couple of us were new to it, so it was maybe just a bit of a learning curve. But I think no more than an hour. And it's quite a small game. It's it comes in a little box. I've seen it sold. Fantasy Flight make it, and I've seen it sold in these big square boxes, and I remember thinking, who would buy that? Or what would they not be disappointed when they got it? And it's like
the standard box size,
just a bunch of little cards. There's not really much else to it. You've got your coin tokens, and that's it.
An hour is a bit longer than I imagined, but like you say, it would normally maybe be a bit less, because it sounds when you've got a game that you're saying is quite harsh potentially, that can be somewhat softened if it's a quick game. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's a game that only takes, like, obviously if it only takes 10 minutes, it doesn't matter if you're getting screwed over for the entire thing.
Well, I think Love Letter's a sort of perfect example of that, because that sounds roughly in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
But like rounds of Love Letter last minutes.
Well, this sounds like a sort of hybrid of a sort of modern party style game with Euro elements added on top of it, sort of made weightier almost. It's like, let's take it's not like Werewolf, but these other games that were spawned off the back of Werewolf, and a lot of them have roll cards in some shape or form, and they're usually shortish. And it's like, well, and quite lightweight, and it's like, well, let's take that but add a gamey element to it with coins and buildings and but it doesn't sound like there's much of that. It's just coins and buildings and colours.
That's basically it. Yeah, it's
no worker placement.
No, it's like they've kind of replaced the worker placement or the roles that you take in something like Puerto Rico with this whole character system, which is a lot more involved and a lot more kind of cutthroat. And I found it interesting anyway. It wasn't what I expected at all.
I think it sounds quite good. I don't really see why.
I'd like to give it a go.
I'd like to play it as well to see why people would get so upset about it.
I can see. I mean, and I can also see where if you are playing it with a very competitive, very contentious group, it could be dragged out because of this whole thing. Like, you've got like the warlord destroying, but there are ways to kind of knock each other back. And I mean, I don't know what it could be like with potentially the like added in some of the other roles.
Yeah. I mean, the warlord, you just choose a person, like another player.
No, you choose a specific building.
Yeah,
of any other building.
Because like the assassin, you choose a role.
Yeah.
You don't choose an individual.
Yeah.
Well,
the warlord comes out last, so you basically, if you get to that point and the warlord hasn't been assassinated or have the money stolen, then they'll go, right, I'm going to destroy this building.
Sorry, I've got a question. Do the buildings serve no other purpose other than just victory conditions?
There's only the purple buildings have any kind of text on them, and they are all pretty much to do with, I didn't really make a good note of them, and they're basically things that'll be like, if you've got, you'll get an extra gold for every 2 like green buildings you have or something like that. Some of them are quite basic. There's one I remember from looking up this earlier on, was that you can earn the round on your 7th building.
Are there
interesting one.
Are there any that tie into the roles? Because that would be quite interesting.
In terms of, I'm not really sure. Like, I mean, again, like they're all pretty much end game based things.
Right? Yeah.
So
sort of.
Unless there's something like finish the game, like use the architect or something on the last round or something like that.
I can't imagine what they would be. I'm just sort
but
of thinking like buildings that say, if you are the architect, you can do the following.
It's more to
modify
do with
the role a little
if you take one of the colour, like the merchant is a green one. If you've got green buildings, you'll get a gold for it. That is pretty much it, really, in terms of
sort of Euro-y.
that works. But yeah, like I said, the bishop can save you from the warlord and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot of different. There's quite a bit of depth to it for what it is. It's quite a basic kind of setup for a game.
Right, cool.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed it though?
I thought it was fun. Yeah, so hopefully try and get a little copy and we can.
Yeah.
We can do each other's heads in with this.
Oh, we don't need a game to do each other's heads in.
Yeah.
So who designed that?
I wrote it says Bruno Faiduti.
Oh yes, he's done a whole bunch of stuff actually. Yeah. And that's a Fantasy Flight game, you're saying?
It is Fantasy Flight, yeah. I think originally got his Hans im Glück, got the classic German one, and Fantasy Flight
jumped in there.
Aye, as they do.
Right, well, we'll need to wrap up there. Before we go, I'm going to say that I got contacted by another Scottish gaming podcast who say that they actually mention us every week on their.
Do they? I think I've seen these guys.
Aye.
Yeah.
Now they pump out a lot of episodes.
All right.
They're on like 3 or 4 episodes a week at the moment, which like gives me chills just thinking about the amount of editing that would involve.
And they're the hour-long episodes.
Yeah. Apparently they mention us every week on their podcast, but they've been continually getting our name wrong, they said. They've only just realised that the full name of our podcast is The Large and Unnecessary First Player Token.
What were they calling this?
I think they were just referring to us as First Player Tokens.
Oh, well.
But yeah, it's close enough.
Yeah.
But they're called the We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. So yeah, but I thought I'd return the favour and give them a mention.
Sure,
there is also another Scottish board gaming podcast called Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast as well. So yeah, check them out. They're brothers and sisters in arms. But they do a lot more episodes than us as well. It's just not quite as interesting. I'm pretty sure.
Doesn't have as much Pawel.
Doesn't it? Yeah, they don't have Pawel, which is definitely a downside. Right, so we'll give out all our internet stuff. So if you want to email us, that's firstplayertoken@gmail.com, FIRST player token. You can find us on all them social media places, your Facebooks and your Twitters and your SoundClouds and that. All our episodes go up on SoundCloud. You can find us on iTunes. We have a YouTube. We have a PSN community if you want to come and join us on there. We have a website, it's firstplayertoken.com. Sorry, I should have said, I don't want to take this away from you, and he likes to do this every week, but our Twitter handle is @1STPlayerToken.
Well, that's pronounced once player token.
Thank you very much, Euan, you're right. Our Discord is discord.me/firstplayertoken. My Twitch username is Unnecessary Chris. I've not had a lot of time to do any streaming lately, but I will get back into it next week. And we are part of the Podnose Network.
The UK's leading entertainment podcast network. I know I was gripping my throat while I did that, so I just see if it would make any difference in my voice. But yes, we're part of the Podnose Network, a lovely network of podcasts about various topics and things. You can find us on there.
Yes.
Podnose.com.
Yes. Go to that website and you can see the massive network of podcasts that are on there. And they're all very interesting. But that's it for this board gaming episode. We'll be back next week with a video games episode where we will talk about Megalomania, so get them played, lads. Get your thoughts in, listeners. But until then, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.